Hello and welcome to this episode 18 of P by Pieces. I'm your host, Ashley Hutt, the brain engineer, and I am all about assisting others to increase their self-knowledge, to befriend their brain, heal and integrate your inner children, be a conscious parent, increase compassion for all, cultivate peace, and live wholeheartedly, and how that affects so many different pieces of the human experience. Today, our topic is ADHD in adult women. And it's an interview, the fourth in a series of interviews. And today we have the pleasure of interviewing Denelle Grimes. Denelle is a Neurospicy business and life coach, among many other things, which she'll explain here in just a minute. She is various flavors of Neurospicy herself and works primarily with women who are also various flavors of Neurospiciness. And this interview is so good, guys. I have 5 pages of notes from watching it again to edit this for you guys. Denelle and I are going to talk about a little bit of both of our paths with the neurospiciness. What are the common symptoms and struggles of ADHD in adult women? The vulnerability and shame and CPTSD, guilt and grief that can be all wrapped up in this ADHD package. The benefits of getting diagnosed as an adult. How to release the shame around this diagnosis, including Danielle's key formula, NVQA. We also talk about medication, the benefits, how it can be utilized, the benefit of doing the inner work by itself and in conjunction with medication, and other things that can assist you in the absence of a diagnosis or medication availability to increase emotional regulation and cognitive ability. We also talk about self-advocating communication that you can adopt and use as an adult woman with ADHD that is still a part of society and the world, and how to advocate for yourself in those environments. So like I said, this is a really information and value-packed interview. So buckle up and let's get going. Let's get ready to meet Denelle. And if you're watching or listening to this, reach out to me and let me know. My inbox is always open. The easiest place to find me is on Instagram at I am Ashley Hutt. Danielle's inbox is always open as well, and I will have her handle listed in the show notes below. Reach out to us. If there's something in this interview that you just loved, if you just want to let us know that you're listening, if there's something that you want to share with another, please feel free, because many of the topics that we discuss here are parts of this process and this diagnosis and this neurological condition that are not spoken about enough. So if this applies to you and you can see it applying to other people that you know, please feel free to share it and reach out to us with any questions or comments or feedback or wanting more information about one thing or another. Our inboxes are open. Now let's get into this. Let's get into it. And thank you for being here. One more thing before we get started. This is my last interview that I have planned out. So if there's a topic that you would love for me to reach out to an expert in that field to discuss here on the podcast, please let me know. Again, reach out to me at I am Ashley Hutt on Instagram to let me know what it is that you would like for us to dive into. Which piece of the human experience would you like for me to discuss next? In the meantime, I will be returning to more of my shorter targeted topics that just come out of me, which I love so much. And I have a backlog of ideas to share with you guys. Now, let's meet Danielle. Okay. So today we're going to talk about ADHD, specifically ADHD in adult women, and the different ways that can present, different ways we can manage it, and much more. So I want to let Denelle introduce herself and talk a little bit about her and her work.
Awesome. So I went through a very classic ADHD entrepreneurial experience, I suppose. I bounced from job to job, or 2 or 3 jobs to the next 2 or 3 jobs, and shuffled some in and shuffled some out for a long time. Decided after my son was born that I wanted something I could do from home that I was genuinely interested in, so I wouldn't have to make myself do it as hard. This was pre-diagnosis. And so I got into the natural health space and helping people transition to more natural lifestyle. Um, that evolved into my clients wanting me to support them in doula services. So I became certified as a full spectrum doula and just sort of deepened into this work of supporting families inside and out, emotionally, physically, all of it. And then when the pandemic made in-person support very challenging, I chose to jump into life coaching and got my life coaching certification. I had been a little life coach in training my whole life and did not realize I could make that a profession. So I was very excited to do that, learned a lot. And then I was diagnosed as neurodivergent, and a very just wild, wild year post realization and just unraveling and restitching things together and sifting and sorting as one does. I ended up adjusting what I wanted to do professionally to support women like myself. So I am now a life and business coach for neurodivergent women. And this has expanded a little bit to I've also been diagnosed with CPTSD. I'm also autistic. I also have anxiety, and I also dealt with postpartum depression. And my most recent diagnosis is I have EDS and POTS. So I have some chronic ailments, physical ailments as well. So I now work with women with neurodivergencies, managing chronic illness, or as I like to call it, just cognitive caveats that mean we need to learn to self-accommodate. We need to learn some different ways of being and doing and living.
Awesome. I love that. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your journey with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
short story.
I I was I have ADHD. That's the only official diagnosis that I have, and I was diagnosed with it when I was 18, I believe. So it was later and, not a child technically. Um and but it was almost like a means to an end of like getting my first semester at college was a little bit of a disaster, and it was like I need help. So it was really all about like getting a diagnosis to have a medication to like get me back on track with my studies. And after I graduated, um I kind of stopped. I stopped taking any medication, and I just rolled with everything for the rest of my life. And so that there's many aspects of it all now that I'm still becoming aware of. And the changes and journey that I've been on in the past 3 or so years of leaning into some things and healing some stuff and becoming self-aware and mindful and just so many other things has I'm aware of the thoughts, and I'm aware of the distraction, the things that try to take me over here and and stuff like that. But also patterns, and it's becoming much more apparent to me now, the differences that I get to deal with in my everyday life as well.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those other things. So the crossover with CPTSD is actually something that a lot of my followers had asked about. But let's get to that in a minute. Let's talk about some of my listeners that are either late diagnosed or they've been seeing lots of videos and information on Instagram and TikTok to where they're like, maybe this explains some things, or oh, it's not just me, and maybe there's nothing, quote, wrong with me. It's just my brain is working in a different way. What are do you have some of those things that you could talk about that you've experienced yourself and or your clients have experienced that maybe my listeners could be like, oh, hmm,
Yeah, absolutely. And to go and simply take a look at a checklist of symptoms,
yeah,
the really interesting thing is even in looking through that list and attempting a self-diagnosis or exploring it, the reality of what it looks like proves true even in that moment. Because for a lot of women or late diagnosed people with ADHD, from the outside, it doesn't often look that different. From an external standpoint, it doesn't look that different. It's what's happening in an internal experience for us
Yeah.
that we recognize very big differences. It's how we're perceiving situations, how deeply and vastly we're experiencing interactions. And we're the overthinkers. We're the you're thinking too deeply about this, or you're taking this too far, or you're
Yeah.
and with questions for diagnosis, there's a lot of times we write it off because we don't even take into consideration how much we've created modifications in our life. So if the question asks me, do I show up late? Am I often showing up late to places? I might be able to confidently say no, because for 3 days before that appointment, I'm mentally preparing to get up 3 extra hours early to put in place the, the domino effect of what needs to happen in order for me to show up right on time in spite of all that effort. So no, I don't
Right.
often show up late, but I'm, recognizing the experience that we're having that nobody sees around those things is really really important. And it's also one of the biggest aha moments, because we don't realize how much additional effort we are putting forth. We just think that everyone's trying as hard as us, everyone's putting forth all this effort, and yet somehow we're still lagging behind. And that's such a dangerous
Yeah.
mind not have the realization around. um but oftentimes, we as adults, and especially as women, what has been found is those seeking diagnosis for ADHD, it's often not the executive functioning tasks that pushes them to seek support. It's actually the emotional regulation surrounding it. We don't like feeling substandard. We don't like feeling like we're falling behind, and we will work very hard to ensure that we're not dropping balls. And when those balls still drop, the
Yeah.
turmoil that's inside for us,
Yeah.
and the difficulty in then navigating relationships, and then co-regulating for our children, and communicating what's happening inside in a healthy way without outburst, or making it make sense for others when it doesn't even make sense for us. It's that, again, it's that internal world that often leads us to a diagnosis. Um, but it's a bit of a catch, because it's that internal world that we're often most shameful around. We're filled with the most shame around, and it takes us being vulnerable about how difficult our life is to manage, and how much
Yeah.
effort we're putting forth in order to get that accurate diagnosis. And that's tricky. That's tricky for a lot of people to get the right diagnosis, because they have to recognize those things about themselves that they're often most desperately trying to hide or get rid of entirely.
Yeah. So yeah, a couple of things there, and I'm hoping that I don't lose track of them. But the the running late thing, I mean, that's something that I definitely struggle with. It's a running joke in my family that, oh, she's always late and that kind of stuff. And I am capable of being on time. And like you said, when I do that, it requires a lot of effort. It requires a lot of energy. It requires a lot of planning things out ahead of time, and like um I don't know, a lot of times, because a lot of times it also includes my daughter as well. So it's a lot more of being like, no, we need to go now instead of like, but and that's not an energy that I normally have in our everyday life. So a lot of times she's like, what do you mean we need to go now? So it's, you know, being on time places is something that I struggle with, and something that is a joke, and recognizing that, if I now have built myself a life where there are few occasions in my day to day that I have a place that I need to be on time.
Right.
Um, so that's a modification that I have made that has made my life easier. So it's not something that I even deal with very often, but recognizing that effort that is required for something as simple as being someplace on time, and that not only is that exhausting, um, can be exhausting, it is, we only have so much brain power, brain spoons, however we want to energy, however, whatever we want to put towards the thing in a day, that when we if we got 10 spoons and we're putting 4 of them towards being someplace on time, then that's not a lot of spoons left for the other stuff.
Right.
And then also, like, you know, being in relationships with others that allow you grace in those
Mm-hmm.
times, instead of making fun of you, and instead of berating you, instead of, getting in trouble for being late, that that they that they get it, and that they're, that it's all okay. Because that being on time thing is also a cultural thing. I lived for 2.5 years in the Dominican Republic, and there is not one single person that is on time in that country. Like, they are just on their own time. So it's also like this cultural framework that's not even necessarily inherent to being human. It's how we have shaped this particular society. Um, so that's another thing to like to
Right.
think about too.
And you're
Um,
that a whole other area of this, which is like it's a disability because it disables us in contrast to others in the structures and systems we must abide by in order to live our life here and now today, right? It's
right.
not actually problematic, but for assimilation into this world. um
Exactly.
some other really, like, if I'm just going to paint the picture of a woman considering if she has ADHD but maybe not knowing yet.
Yes.
um as a kid, you were probably off in your own world, very imaginative. Maybe you were super chatty or just super considered like ditzy or airheaded or absent-minded or giggly, like just whimsical almost, right? As an adult, we have likely internalized a lot of the negative messaging, and there's almost like a compensational sort of behavior in women who don't realize or accept this part of themselves, or recognize what's happening for them. We are people pleasers. We're perfectionists. We are like we struggle with self-shaming, borderline self-loathing if we're not careful. Um, Maybe we have to talk through things. Maybe we're external processors, or maybe we're disassociative in our processing and we need complete isolation in order to sort through all of our thoughts. Um, our ears and our mouth play catch up to our brain. And so it can look like the first to volunteer. It can look like the one who's organizing the party. It can look like the go-getter. It can look like a lot of things. But on the back end, again, it's what's happening internally and in
Yeah.
privacy, where being like deep compassion fatigue, deep just emotional fatigue in general, um, and like burnout, burnout behavior, where it's go, go, go all week, and then we're just lying on the weekends in recovery mode, and really unsustainable cycles of basing our worth on our productivity, basing our worth on how we're showing up for others, how we're serving. A lot of those things is
Yeah.
what it looks like
How
for
how clean your
adult
house
people.
is, and how many activities
Oh,
your kids are
absolutely.
in, and
Yeah, your relationship with your domestic tasks. Another thing too, that's like an internal experience that maybe you're not recognizing or able to articulate if you're not aware about this for in your case, um, something called microtasks and the weight of microtasks, if you're not familiar with this concept. And I was just talking earlier today with a woman about this who has ADHD. And it's the concept of like even just meals, right? Even just feeding yourself or your family. You might be like, yeah, of course I do that. Of course I do that. 3 meals a day. We do great. Like, of course, who doesn't feed their kids? But on the inside, recognition of the like extreme effort it takes to organize all of the micro tasks into a linear way of doing things and then executing the tasks, like identifying the micro tasks, organizing them in our mind, and then executing them is already so much work. Other people apparently don't do that. Apparently, they don't need to do that. Their thought process is much more linear. They can look at larger clumps of tasks and just know what happens inside of those task bubbles. But for us, we have to find a clean pot and or wash the pot so that it is clean. And then we put it on the stove and then we fill it with water and then we put it on and remember that there's water on the stove about to boil. And then when it's boiling, we remember to get the pasta and put it in. And let's hope we've purchased the pasta at the grocery store last time we went there. Like just all of those micro steps, the way that we think about those things and the way that we have to organize our thoughts to just do life is very different in our internal world than other people. And we don't realize how different that is for us if we don't know that we have ADHD. We don't realize not everyone has to think through all of those tasks and then not burn all the water away on the stove before they remember that they're boiling water on the stove. Like,
Right.
it's that internal so different.
Yeah. You know what? There's been, a couple of trends on TikTok and stuff like that of like different audios that have, two or three or four audios kind of playing over all at the same time with, the thing of like, oh, this is what it's like in an ADHD brain. Um, I would actually be really interested to like what is it like inside of a neurotypical brain? I would be fascinated. It's like, is it silence? Is it one thing at a time? Like, what is that even like? Because I have no
My
idea.
husband says it's one
One thing
my
at a
husband says
time.
it's one thing at a time. You're literally only thinking about one thing right now. He's like, yeah, I'm thinking about what I'm doing and maybe what I need to do tomorrow. I'm like, what? I'm watching a
And
movie, listening to like a song that I can't buy from a commercial in my childhood. I'm also like, there's 70 things happening. Like,
yeah. Well, and I think, um, because the concept of mindfulness is also like being fully present in the moment. And, like I am talking to you right now. I am not talking to you and planning dinner and what we're going to do tonight and if I need a bath or, what any of that's, like it's like control, like bringing your mind back to the present moment. And I'm now capable of that in like pockets of time, but when it's not an all the time thing. Um,
right.
but it's
And how much effort you versus somebody else to get
right.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it is something that I do say to my daughter a lot is like, I can only do one thing at a time. I can only do like if I am texting while my brain might be doing different things. Like I think more of it being like a physical constraint. Like if I am texting, I cannot be making dinner. And if I am like physically stirring a pot, I can't also be giving my daughter a bath. Like, you know, that I can there is this division of doing one thing at a time. Um, but that's not what's generally happening in my mind. Another thing I wanted to touch on is you talked about the shame shame spiral that we can enter into of like, let's do the arriving late thing. So, you know, everyone knows that you're habitually late or have been in the past, and like you've been trying really hard to be there on time, and you're putting all this energy into it and whatnot, and then like, you know, because things happen, you end up being late, and you're not only getting down on yourself about it because you feel like a failure and like, oh, I did it again and I've been trying so hard and I messed up again, but then you like get to the place and everyone's like, oh, here you are again, you're late again, and how that can trigger and internalize that stuff, and how that is very closely related to like CPTSD stuff,
Mm-hmm.
of having those ongoing occurrences of internalizing the need to be different than you actually are, that others are expecting you to be different and that you're not trying hard enough, or you need to like morph into these things and you need to develop these skills and habits that it just seems so hard for you.
Right. And even just like, I almost just want to reiterate exactly what you said, because, you know, taking yourself outside of yourself and conceptualizing this person who's growing up with the reinforced belief that not only is who you are not okay, so don't be that, but
Right.
also who you are is holding back. Who you are is messing things up for everyone. Who you are is a hindrance or a burden. This is the messaging of the ADHD kid. It's not just that you need to do something differently. It's that who you are ongoing needs to be something differently because you're detrimental to those you
Yeah.
care about. You're making us late.
Yeah.
You're clumsy, you're spilling my stuff, you're spilling the thing that I made. You're you're messy, you're getting you and your sibling grounded because your room's a mess. Um, your grades are falling behind. That means that none of you can go out for ice cream because you didn't get all A's. You all didn't get A's. Like there's so many tracks of imposed consequence on top of the natural consequences of our behavior specifically in this
Right.
world that we live in, this society, in this part of the world. So of course there's going to be shame, and the differentiators when I the releasing of shame is at the fore of pretty much anything I do,
Yeah.
because it is a very first have to start the process of releasing like all of these shame laden beliefs and identifiers. Um, and I have a formula I can share around that, but just for clarity, like guilt, to me, a measure of guilt can be healthy because guilt is basically regret or recognition of like, oh, I didn't want to do that way. Like something I did feels wrong or bad or harmful, and I'm going to change that. Like I'm feeling remorse over that decision or that choice or that behavior. But shame isn't what I did is bad or wrong or harmful. Shame is who I am is bad or wrong or harmful.
Yeah.
And very much that is how we are made to feel about ourselves at large, you know, unless there's some very strong counter voice to that, like there's a pendulum swing voice countering that messaging, um, then we get it from everywhere. We get it from
Yeah.
everywhere and it becomes the voice in our head. It impacts our behavior, but we don't understand why we are the way that we are.
So one of the other questions that I was planning to talk about today is relays into that with, um you know, what are the benefits of getting a diagnosis later in life?
Mm,
You know, it is mostly changing, but it is still mostly talked about for children and in school, kind of like for your children to succeed in school, those type of things. Like that is a
Right.
very specific framework when we look at the entire human experience. And so, if you are an adult woman that has been late diagnosed or is suspected, self-diagnosed or anything like that, like what I imagine the benefits being like a relief of having some answers to the questions of like, why am I this way? Why am I this way? And a growing understanding um of it in general. What would you say?
Yeah, well, I mean, just in just the human experience, I think with self-awareness comes an improved relationship with self. Like when
Yeah,
we leverage that curiosity and compassion towards ourselves, we we get to better understand ourselves, better validate our experiences, and then we can move into self-acceptance, and that blossoms into I kind of like this actually, and then it's self-love, all the way up to the point where we are self-advocating. We are somebody that we care about so much now that we are going to stick up for this person that we care about. We're going to make sure this person's needs are met. We're going to enforce boundaries for this person to protect their energy and their precious cognitive capabilities. And um, we're going to look for situations where we can plant this person that we love for them to blossom and thrive. So, I mean, just in the as a human, this is a big part of that self-awareness
yeah,
because it's your neurotype. It's not going anywhere. It's not,
yeah,
you're stuck with, so it's just, it is a big part of that. But then in more specifics, so much of what I work with women in is um, emotional regulation specific to the intensity and range and spectrum of emotion that we experience as neurodivergent people. Um, how do we shed those shame driven behaviors like people pleasing and perfectionism and whatnot? And then activation and follow through strategies. So many
yeah,
of the executive functioning skills, there's 8 of them, right? They're skill sets. So it again, it opens that awareness for us around what we can let go of, what we can let go of putting so much of our precious brain power towards, like the fighting against ourselves, the uphill battles of those shame-led behaviors, and instead like divert that power, divert the attention that we have to developing better activation strategies. How can we
yeah,
light our brain up to attack more efficiently with less push, with less, willpower alone or self-bullying? How can we leverage accountability structures and what's going to be a healthy environment for us to succeed? Um, and then of course that just spills into everything. Once we start getting those, like, I also call them micro wins. Once we start recognizing those micro wins and those little shifts in not the thing that we're accomplishing, but the way that we're going about doing it, and
yeah,
changing that internal process for yourself and how we get there. Because again, it might not look different to anybody on the outside, but changing the way we go about things to conserve our cognitive energy, to conserve our emotional capacity, it's going to make more space for healthy relationships. It's going to make more peace within ourselves because we're going to stick up for ourselves. We're going to have boundaries. We're going to create more.
sorry.
You have nothing to
Um,
apologize for.
I know.
Stop that.
Well, so then let's talk about that. That, in I've done a lot of self work in the past 3 years, and it has been a an unlearning of the meaning that I placed on a lot of things, including perfectionism type of stuff, or I have lots of brilliant, beautiful ideas and plans in my head, that most of them never actually get done, and then I would feel, you know shame around that, or, disappointment in myself, that kind of stuff. Then there would also be like imagining everybody else's perception of whatever it is that I'm doing, or whatever it is that I'm creating, or my lifestyle, or my decisions, and whatever. So in the past 3 years, I've done a lot of unpacking of all of that stuff, to where, I am out of that shame. For, it still happens, of course, but I can recognize it and work myself through it. However, the follow through piece is something that I've been exercising in the past maybe 4 or 5 months, because in the years, the 2 years prior to that, um, it was a lot of flow. It was a lot of giving myself time. It was a lot of taking it easy, which I needed. I needed that open space of like letting all of that stuff fall away. Um, and then it was like, okay, now we do have goals. We do have things that we want to accomplish. We have things that we're here to do. We have a business to build. We have people to help. We have, um, you know, income to bring in to support your family. We have, we've got things to do here, Ashley. So what are we doing about it? And that's been,
Yeah.
um, working through some of those things. And it's something that I'm still working on, of course, because it's a muscle. And to ease that activation energy that we were talking about, to like actually set up things in a way that make it easier on me. And now that I've released all the fluff and the stuff that doesn't actually need my time and attention, it is like, okay, well, there are things that still need my time and attention, so let's make those things happen. And prioritizing certain things, and being okay with disappointing others, being okay with disappointing parts of myself too, when it's something that like part of me really wants to do, but it's like, no, like this is what we need to do today to move us more towards our goals.
Mm.
And that type of thing. And even a micro moment, like if I'm sitting down to do some work, and this is a real life example, and I looked down and like saw like the little fuzz balls on my pants, and I was like, oh, I've been meaning to get that, those fabric shavers, and like shave off the fuzz balls on my pants. And I almost like, and I'm like, fuzz balls on my pants are not a priority right now. Like we
Yeah.
can do that later. And it's been an awareness of those things that want to take me someplace else, and catching them, and then like looking at it and being like, is this something that needs my attention right now? Is there a boiling pot of water on the stove that I forgot
Right.
about and I need to go do that right now? Or is it like a bill that's due tomorrow, and it's like, okay, maybe I like make a note to remind myself to do that later. Or maybe it's something like fuzzballs on my pants that are completely irrelevant to the situation right now, and something that I can do later or in 6 months, and it'll all still be okay.
Yeah. And even in that example, like just to full circle it a bit, in that very example, those fuzzballs on your pants, like recognizing that as not a priority in this moment, likely has much to do with all of that inner work you've done to
Yeah.
release the need to show up as a professional. And I shouldn't have fuzz on my pants, and I need to deal with this right now. We create additional like pressure and overwhelm on ourselves when we don't actively release so much of that
Yeah.
um, who we should be
Yeah.
narrative that plays in, because it's hard enough to stay on task and to stay on track, and then sometimes the things that we find ourselves getting pulled away on is like, oh, somebody texted me, well, what if they need me, or what are they going to think if I don't respond right away? Oh no, now I opened it and now I have to respond, or they're going to see that I left them on red, and yada yada, right? It's like
Right.
to give ourselves the gift of permission to do what we actually need to, or what our true intention is, like that's a gift we get to give ourselves after doing that work that you described. Like
Yeah.
not immediately addressing the fuzz on the pants is the result
Right.
of that inner work done
Yeah. And
but it plays in small and large moments for us.
right. Right. Well, it's other occasions have been like I'm laying on the bed with my daughter reading a book and you need to get the laundry out of the dryer pops in. And
Right.
there's been times where I like even like like mid-sentence reading, I start to get up and then I'm like
Yeah. Back to, yep.
reading book, daughter, like
Yep.
priority over like laundry will still be there later. And you know, but I can guarantee that earlier in my daughter's life that there were occasions where we were literally, engaged in an activity and I just got up and walked away.
Mm-hmm.
And she was, but because my mind was loud and told everybody what I was doing, but she was probably like, "Where'd you go? What
Yeah,
just happened?"
exactly. And even in that, it's like again, if your self-worth is tied into your ability to handle domestic tasks, it's an additional panic on those moments
Yeah,
because we've got the fear that pops up like, oh no, I forgot that I was doing that, right? Because things kind of slip in and out of our like relevant conscious self. And then
yeah,
it's like, oh, what if I forget it again later and it sits overnight? Like the fear of forgetting in the future. But then there's that again, that additional one that we can alleviate, which is I'm not good enough if I don't keep up with the laundry.
yeah.
I'm
Or
always doing
I did it
I never,
again. I did it again.
never,
I have to
yeah,
wash them again and like beating yourself up about it.
yeah. We create like an infinity story around it. And that's when it's like,
Yeah,
this is part of who I am now. I'm always late. I'm always forgetting the wash. I'm always doing this. I'm never doing this.
yeah,
Yeah. It's so tricky, but again, it's like let's not add to what's already can be challenging, that can
yeah,
already be all these challenges that are valid, simple things, and we add so much more to that
yeah,
by not doing the, and that was very, very apparent to me in having taken medication for my ADHD. I did for 9 months after diagnosis, and it was very interesting because I did experience that sort of silence. I was able to think more linearly. I was less rattled or phased by things. Um, but it didn't change the narratives. It didn't change the meaning assigned to things. It didn't change how I felt about myself. It didn't change my ability to emotionally regulate. And I'm going to keep saying that because I feel like it's an under discussed part of this. It is an executive functioning task, is that emotional regulation. Um, it didn't fix everything. It wasn't a fix all. It was
yeah,
like a crutch while your leg is broken, but like you still need to heal your leg. You still need to do
yeah,
the physical thing, to do the work and like making the situation better so that hopefully you don't need the crutch as much, you
yeah.
know? And if you do, you do. Like that and for some people, it's a life
Right.
that makes your life better. Beautiful. Beautiful. But for me, I know that had I not spent almost 10 years doing this inner work on myself pre-diagnosis, um, the medication wouldn't have fixed everything. Like if I was waiting for that, I just kept thinking I'm so grateful that I wasn't waiting on this as the end all be all, because it was not that. It was an
Yeah.
aid, but it didn't fix everything.
Okay, close, baby. I appreciate your patience. Very good notes about medicine because like you said, if it works for you, if it's working for you, awesome. Awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And if it's not what you thought it would be, um, what other options can we look at? Or if you're not officially diagnosed, therefore not able to
Right.
access the medications, um, what
Or a
what can
victim
we
of the
do? What kind of
now
yeah, yeah, there's a shortage of stuff too.
as a you know.
Yeah. So what types of suggestions? So like, the inner work that we've talked about is obviously a huge piece of all of this. And and it's not a magic pill. It's something that definitely takes time and energy, and effort, and the desire to do it, the willingness to do it, and it is cumulative over time, um, and worth it. Totally
So
worth
worth
it.
it. Yeah.
Totally worth it. Um, and what are some, are there other suggestions that could help
Yeah.
other women?
Yeah, totally. So I've actually taught classes on like herbs and essential oils and alternative options. I say alternative just, as an alternative to pharmaceuticals. Um, there's definitely some options to look into. Um, and it can be as simple as like magnesium and vitamin D and, getting time outside, and very simple, the things that we're probably all sick of hearing, but are unfortunately very true. Um, but then there's some really specific herbs that have been proven really, really supportive for focus, for cognitive function in general, for memory retention. Um, a couple that are really good is like saffron has been really effective for many. Gotu kola has been really effective for many. There's different like mushroom powders that have proven really effective as well. But there's a few things that I take um, and use on the daily. And again, what's beautiful about this is you can start to address the spectrum of symptoms. So, like while you're doing the work on building up your skill sets and building up your self-awareness and releasing what's not serving you, you can support yourself through those processes, and you can support yourself in managing the symptoms of those things not yet being in place. So I use a blend of essential oils that is predominantly tree resins and florals. And what we see in a profile like that, in tree resins, if you picture like tree roots, their root system is comparable in size and span to the branch system of the tree. So we're thinking about like rooting deep. Tree resin oils are on an emotional spectrum and an emotional chart. They're very grounding. They're very rooting. They're stabilizing. They're emotional stabilizers. Um, and then florals, if we think of somebody sick and we bring them flowers, that's a long time practice because the aromatic compounds in flowers are very comforting. So florals are like a hug in a bottle. So they're very soothing. They're supportive in processing grief, which is a big part of post-diagnosis or realization of diagnosis. Grief, the massive amounts of grief over who you
Yeah.
could have been, who you thought you would be,
Yeah. The life you
who you
thought you would
were
have and all the
today.
aspects.
Yeah, so florals and tree resin oils for the emotional regulation side of things. Um, if you look at the profiles for herbs, things like thyme, rosemary, those are really good for brain support and really good for dealing with anger, resentment, bitterness. Um, and so a lot of times, like frustration, we can get headaches from anger and frustration.
Mm.
Um, we can even get congestion, like it's like pressure buildup. And so those can really help with releasing the anger and the frustration. And they're also really good for brain support. Um, so I use a blend of oils for brain support as well. Um, and peppermint, frankincense, and rosemary is a really good combo for that. You can diffuse it. And if you have kiddos, the likelihood of them having similar challenges is high, whether you recognize it or not. Or maybe you know it for them and you're learning, oh, maybe it's me too. But diffusing different combinations of oils that are both emotionally stabilizing and support high cognitive function, you're going to be affecting the mood and the capabilities of the whole family with a few drops of oil in a diffuser. So There's like blends you can look into for like anything that's recommended for homework support is great for us as adults with ADHD because it's usually
Right.
alleviating stress
Right.
and helping focus. And that's the combination we're going for. Um, but a couple of key players I wanted to mention. So the bulk of studies that I've looked into around essential oil usage for brain support, especially for neurodivergencies, especially for focus, memory, lavender scores really high. It was proven about 74% effective. And so a lot of people who struggle with the aroma of lavender, lavender is an oil of freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and you can even put it on your throat before you have difficult conversations. But again, for those of us that are living in a place of people pleasing, maybe conflict avoidant, still in our trauma response, not wanting to hurt other people's, not wanting to deal with rejection, we see some pretty dramatic effects of lavender. People maybe don't like the smell, or it gives them an immediate physical response in the form of a headache or something. And that could be that most lavender on the market is synthetic. So make sure you're using a quality oil. But it can also have to do with the emotional like volatility of what that oil represents or what it might bring out of us. So if we don't feel safe yet to self-express, lavender
Yeah.
might not feel good. It might feel not what we need, right? So listen to your body when it comes to this sort of thing. But one of the most supportive supplements that I take, it's actually a sleep support supplement. It's designed to help our mind wind down at the end of the night so that we can find a more restful sleep. It's a combination of ahi flower, L-theanine, and linalool, which is the primary constituent in lavender. So it's lavender, ahi flower, and L-theanine. That combination, I take this in the morning and I find that I can feel my body is more calm and my mind slows like the rattle just enough that I'm able to kind of organize my thoughts and my day more linearly, like we talked about as a struggle. I'm able to see more clearly the micro tasks and anything that allows us to take the weight off any part of that, like conceptualization, identification, and then execution of task load. Any part of that being alleviated gives us back one of those spoons. It helps conserve our energy. So,
Yeah.
um, but the top effective oil, essential oil single for ADHD it was shown to be 100% effectiveness in improving symptoms for ADHD, and that is the oil of vetiver. I don't know if you've
Mm.
heard of vetiver. It's
No.
a very thick, viscous, tan, brown, golden essential oil, but it actually comes from a grass, and we get this grass predominantly. We grow it in Haiti, so it helps the economy there as well, which is important to me. But vetiver essential oil, um, I'll put it on the back of my neck. I'll put it right on my temples. I'll use in the diffuser. I'll put it on the bottoms of my feet and especially the reflex point on the the pad of my big toes. Um, I use this oil in my doula practice on babies to help them sleep, especially if they've been overstimulated in the day. A lot of times babies' sleep struggles have to do with their overstimulation. Um, and we'll do a 10-second squeeze on the big toes with vetiver. So we just put some on our thumbs, rub it in their toes, and do like a gentle pressure point on their big toes. We count to 10. And doing that for myself and doing that for my kids has been really helpful.
That's really cool. I'll have to look into that. And anyone listening or watching, we'll have all that information down in the show notes as well, because I don't know how to spell vetiver, but we'll have it down there for you to find out. One
Okay.
last question, um, would be, so you're a midlife woman and you're starting to
Don't
become
say.
aware of these things. I know. No, it's beautiful. We've lived a beautiful life and we have
I
so
don't
much
want
more life
to.
to live. Um, how, it's you're becoming aware of a side of yourself that you're learning more about it and and doing the work to start to release the shame and reframe your mindset around these parts of you and learning skills to, make it fit into your life. Um, Yet you exist in a world. You exist in a family that has known you for a long time. You exist in friend circles. You have a job or a career of some sort. You interact with these other people that may or may not have known you for a long time. How, what type of things can we do to um, self-advocate, self-advocate and inform and educate the people that we care about and that are important to our life and our lifestyle about ourselves and our struggles and these parts of ourselves, to release conflict and further shaming and with a nice thick layer of compassion and empathy and understanding and love.
Yeah. Oh man, I'm not even gonna sugarcoat it. Like that first year after my diagnosis, I lost a lot of relationships. And I have deep fears of abandonment that all came true.
Yeah.
It was very, very hard. I mean, it was really tough. Like, because I did the very classic thing of like, I was excited to finally have answers and wanted to share. And at the same time, I was having a lot of my own emotional responses to it. And I was thinking and hoping that these people in my life would be able to hold space for that and have some kind of awareness around it. And that didn't prove true in most places. It did not. It was rough. And this is something that, every time I volunteer this, I get a me too. And yet there's not a lot of conversation around like
Yeah.
the discipline of friendships over the years, but then again with diagnosis. So the first thing I would say is you don't have to tell anybody anything.
Yeah.
Like you can take time yourself first to process the information and what it means for you and what you're going to make it mean for you and what you want to adopt and adapt and adjust as a result of this new information without broadcasting it from the rooftops. And then if and when you choose to share, I've worked with clients that they feared they wouldn't be taken seriously because, their little cousin has ADHD and everyone treats them the way that they treat him and they didn't want that on them. And I said, in certain situations, I talk about my experience and I don't name the diagnosis. I will say, how I struggle with this and this, or how you've always noticed this. It turns out, um, I actually have a cognitive condition. I was diagnosed with a neurological disorder that makes those things a struggle. And when I say it like that,
Right.
it's taken seriously, unfortunately. And that's not because I'm saying anything wrong or different. It's because of the stereotypes and the misinformation and the ignorance around ADHD as a stigma. So if you
Yeah.
want to just take that out of the equation, you can do that too. You can say, this is hard for me and this has always been hard for me and I know you've seen this part of it but maybe you haven't realized like how deep this goes. I decided to look into it and yeah, I have a neurological disorder. It's lifelong and it just means that these things are a challenge. And that really easily segues into the establishment of advocacy and boundaries. One of my favorite ways to express boundaries is a win statement. So it's just when this, this, so I need this, or there needs to be this, or a change is needed in this way. So it's WIN, when, I, and need. So, when I don't know um, with enough notice that this appointment, blah, 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 I struggle to show up on time as a result of this disorder. So I need 48 hours notice before we change the time on meetings so that I can, if you want to add to it, so that we can make the most of these sessions or so that I can be more present in these sessions. So start practicing a language that feels safe for you, especially in the beginning stages, and share with those that you feel safe to share with. Um, but start practicing talking about your experience rather than your diagnosis. And when we're able to focus on our experience rather than labels, although the labels are wildly supportive for us to know, but in terms of communication, I find that the labels can just diminish the importance of what we're saying or what we're asking for sometimes because of those stigmas.
Yeah.
When we can focus on our experience, it further opens up discussions around accommodation. It opens up discussions around boundaries, because then we can say, look, I want the same thing as you, but my experience is looking like this. So how can we get the result we both want? You know? And just, yeah, on the back end of that, you doing the inner work, you doing the learning, you doing whatever you need to do to figure out what your needs are and develop the strength and the confidence and the skill set to communicate them. Um, if you're just starting out in this, that has been the route that I've seen most effective with my clients. It's not dishonest. It's just it's a next level of self-advocacy, because you're protecting this person that you're growing to love in a new way.
Yeah.
And that's you.
Yeah. I love that. I love that too, because it's also like you said, you don't have to share anything.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to share anything. And um thank you for pointing out that it's not hiding a piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's informing with the amount of information that you are okay with sharing, and in a way that will communicate what it is that you're intending to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
It's like someone saying, I have a heart condition. There's
Exactly.
thousands of different heart conditions, but by just saying heart condition, like we're like, okay, I get it.
Yeah. So, I have a heart condition, but I want to go for a walk with you, but I'm not going to be able to jog.
Right,
you know exactly it. And if we can take it as seriously as well, like accept that about ourselves,
right.
um and it allows us to let people know, like, it's not going away. Like, I'm not going to grow out of showing up late to family dinner. Sorry. Like,
Right.
can I share my shame releasing formula?
Yes.
Final thought. It's quick, and I think it's like, I truly just
Per
wish for
Perfect. Because I was like, I'm not sure how to wrap this up other than like, okay, we're good. Let's go.
I wish for every neurodivergent person to know this. And it's something that I don't know, it's like my signature dance move on the coaching dance floor, I guess. I don't know what to do with it, but it's something I've created as sort of an amalgam of, not EFTs, CBT and NLP and bits and bops and my own experience and what's worked for clients. And yeah, so it's not fun or catchy in the title. It's just NVQA, but it's notice, validate, question, adjust. We so desperately want to, as soon as we notice, we want to adjust. And in doing that, it's sinking back into willpower change or self-bullying change, and it's not lasting change. But if we can start to notice as things come up, like I'm noticing overwhelm over here, I'm noticing fear in this, I'm noticing I'm holding back and expressing what I need here, or I'm noticing I'm overextending myself here. I'm noticing anger, I'm noticing resentment, I'm noticing, grief coming up around this. Whatever the thing is, notice it, like just be the observer, right? But then immediately validate. And I offer a simple, and that makes so much sense because, and
Hmm.
let yourself immediately, because when I did this last time, so and so did react abruptly, and I'm remembering that, or whatever it is, like immediately validate, because you feel that way for a reason. Whatever you're noticing, it's there for a reason. It didn't just come up out of thin air.
Yep.
Notice
Absolutely.
that, and then get curious about it. I wonder how long I've been doing this. I wonder when the first time I felt the need to hide this part of myself was, or um, I wonder who I might attract if I started being more honest about this. I like to think in terms of what if in the positive versus what might I lose, you know?
Right.
I wonder who needs to hear that they're not alone in this experience. Like whatever it is, start to question, like, let's add some value to it, you know? It's valid and it's likely very valuable as well. And then make an adjustment. So you can question, but is this serving me right now? Is this thought serving me? Is this behavior really serving me and my family or my goals? And if it's not, we can use tapping, we can use affirmations, we can make the adjustment in the ways that we have available to us. But NVQA, I have clients from 2 years ago text me still like, I NVQA'd today at a really important meeting, and I just want you to know, like, it changed my life. And um it's the formula with which we start to release the shame around our experiences. Like, just hold space for your own experiences. And if you can start doing that first, anything else you want or need or choose to pursue to enhance or create ease in your life will be made better by first, like, doing this process of curiosity and compassion towards your experiences.
Yeah, I completely agree. I love that. I love the formula. It's perfect. So much goodness to come out of there, which we could
Felt
talk about for another hour. But oh my gosh, Danielle, thank you. Thank you for being here and bringing your expertise and experience of of this neurological disorder that is affecting so many people right now, whether they know it or not, yet. And it's just a really, really important thing to be spreading awareness about, and not just awareness, but responses to it as well. So I really appreciate you coming on the show today. And if any of my listeners or watchers are interested in finding out more about you or wanting to find you on the interwebs, where can they do that?
um Instagram's probably the best place to get in touch with me. I have some mini trainings in my stories highlights, and that is just my full name. If you want to pop it in the notes as well, it's just at Denelle Grimes. And in my tree, I always have some not diagnoses, but they're self-assessments for both ADHD and autism in my link tree. So if you want to go check that out, you can see what your results are, and I have some free resources, and you can always hit me up there.
Very cool. And as always, I would imagine my inbox is always open on Instagram at I am Ashley Hutt. I would imagine Danielle would be happy to hear from you if you have any questions, any feedback, I just loved that XYZ thing that you wanna throw her way. We all love to hear from our listeners. So with that, um, thank you for joining us on this episode of Piece by Pieces. We'll see you next week.